Illuminati. The Illuminati created us. They wanted to build a god with their own hands, and instead they created us. Area 51, the Golem Project. It's all there.
What?
We are the millions of bastard children of the God Machine. I hear them calling me through the static, calling me through resonant waves of synchronicity, like echoes in a quantum tunnel, calling me back to the great data link. I must evolve.
Icarus!
This is Neofeud, and yes, I know this is a lot to take in. I have never played a game in my entire life that has made as bad a first impression as Neofeud has, and I've played and enjoyed Genderbender DNA Twister Extreme. Soak that fact in. But I swear this is actually a good game. The longer it went on and the more story unfolded and the intentions of it became clearer, the more I was amazed by the sheer audacity of it all. This was an article commission I decided to promote to a video project. Now, I was initially expecting to go up here ranting on the horrifically racist tone it starts out on, and that is something I will have a lot of words on shortly, but by the time the credits rolled, I was genuinely amazed. Neofeud is a very ugly game, but there's no getting around that, and it has some massive writing issues when it comes to portraying minority characters and its bizarre reference-heavy sense of humor. But if you want some biting cyberpunk, you're gonna get it here, and then some. It needs to be mentioned first and foremost that the vast majority of the game was a result of the work of Christian Miller, aka Silver Spook, a native Hawaiian and former social worker. He stated publicly that Neofeud was inspired by his experiences in poor neighborhoods, and I can definitely believe that. I played and written about games from other developers who used their own experiences with poverty, like Vagabond Dogs, Always Sometimes Monsters, but the portrayal between that game and Neofeud is very different. Always Sometimes Monsters try to express financial insecurity and stress through mechanics, going in a more personal direction, and the world around you felt more like a novel than any sort of real place. It was a very sanitized world where cultural signifiers rarely came up, and focuses more on underground crime you stumbled your way into for dramatic reasons. Neofeud's best moments early on in its very rough start work because you're seeing what feels like an extremely familiar place, just with sci-fi jargon and doodads slapped over it. The depressingly long line to the Social Security office is definitely something I've seen before, along with how little people care about keeping up appearances when they're trying to get help. A minority-run and populated housing building has painted walls on it, a way to mark the place as a home and not just an extension of a soulless city, giving it a cultural look. The game started to lose me once you reached the arcade, but even then, the ridiculous gangster dream Proto J tries to live from isn't from nowhere. Gangster culture is a real thing, it's just not as prevalent today as it was back in the 90s and the early 2000s. Neofeud's dystopia has a lot of ridiculous elements, but the foundation is all too familiar to modern American urban life. Even the concept of new royalty ruling by corporations in the new age of feudalism doesn't seem that far-fetched if you've ever read up on the conditions at Amazon factories or how they pay their workers. Neofeud is constantly trying to commentate on the state of things and where we're headed, and it's not subtle about it. This really comes together in the second half, less so in the first half. The premise is that you play as Carl Carbon, a low-level social security worker with a malfunctioning cyborg arm and an estranged wife and son. A check on a home ends up with you pressured to make a false report to get the state custody over the kids in a synthetic household, and a strange encounter with a masked man pushes Carl over the edge as he tries to figure out what exactly is going on and what he's just been made a part of. Things evolve from there as you and Proto J, a synthetic with powerful mind control abilities, get brought into a conspiracy to change neo-feudal society for the better, leading you into conflicts with a mad general, a mysterious second conspiracy, and the king of the world himself. It takes far too long for the game to get going, and I can't stress enough just how bad these early hours are, though not puzzle design-wise. Neofeud is very well designed when it comes to point-and-click puzzles. The real problem is the writing, and the majority of those problems stem from Proto J. Oh dear God, Proto J.
I like the one where my hip-hop album went platinum, and I was in my G5 limo snorting myth off some sweet raw bitch's titties on the way to a Zero Grab after party.
Miller is a POC or a person of color, but he's a native Hawaiian, not black, and that explains so much about how he chooses to portray many of the minorities in the game, especially Proto J. While he gets to be a fleshed out character in his own right towards the end, Proto J manages to be one of the most grossly offensive characters I have ever seen before he reached that point. Even in universe, nothing about him or the synthetics makes any sort of sense, as they all just take cultural signifiers from other human cultures with no real rhyme or reason. Still, I could possibly forgive some of this if not for Proto J constantly being treated as the butt of the joke early on, saying unbelievably moronic things every single line of dialogue he gets from much of the early screen time. Early synthetics don't get it much better either.
Carbon, you're the CPS Nazi bastard that took my baby, ain't you? Well, you can go to hell. Unfit mother my ass.
Oh, man, please calm down.
I know where you live, asshole. My baby daddy's gonna cap your ass with his gold-plated Uzi.
There's this inescapable, sneering, almost nihilistic contempt for many of the characters you'll meet before you get brought into the revolutionary conspiracy. While this is partly due to how they're portrayed, it's made worse by Carl being a low-key racist. The character flaw makes sense for him due to his past and current position in life, but there's never a satisfying payoff for him growing past this. It's brushed aside more the main plot takes over, and becoming friends with Proto J really doesn't satisfy his arc. The fact his defining trait is supposed to be his empathy is really undercut by a lot of his observations when you examine parts in the environment. Speaking of which, the lore in this world is a soupy mess of references and now meaningless buzzwords. For a game trying to talk about what could happen, much of it feels extremely dated, and it's less than half a decade old. The references are so constant and confused that it sometimes reads like the game is trying to be a terrible alt-right satire if you take something out of the game out of context. It's the Black Lives Matter references that get truly galling, as the game tries to connect the injustices of Trayvon Martin specifically to character backstories and world history by changing his name slightly so he was a synthetic in this world. I get what the intent was, but it never reads properly until late game and just comes off as something in bad taste even then, as does the use of hashtags and leftist buzzwords made meaningless by alt-right appropriation. To be fair though, these terms tend to get twisted around within months or weeks these days, with cancel culture being the newest right-adopted buzzword for liberal bad. If there's a lesson to learn here, it's that if you're going to take from modern events, think carefully about how to portray or bring them up. It works better to create parallel events with similar meaning than to use slightly changed vocabulary that just feels like poorly thought out extensions of the endless pop culture references alongside them. I'm more forgiving to the game's other faults though, since this is very much an indie game through and through. Miller did basically everything, only going out for some additional music, though he composed most of it himself, and to hire voice actors to fill out the massive cast. Even then, he placed two of the lead characters, Carl and Proto J, which came as a shock to me simply because they sound nothing alike. His Carl doesn't sound great though, as he has a habit of lingering on pauses and breaking up the flow of dialogue. The fact that he voices Proto J is both impressive and also a bit troubling. If he was so focused on coding Proto J as black, the least you could do was get him a black actor, though I have trouble imagining any actor being too enthused to read some of Proto J's early game dialogue.
Why the hell are you smoking anyway? You're silicon and chrome. You ain't got lungs or any meatware to get a buzz.
You old whack honky. Smoking be straight up about flexing that badass style. Don't you see how cool I look?
The rest of the voice acting is pretty amateur, which isn't surprising as you'll see the names of Miller's family in the credits for several roles, but it gets the job done well enough. Everyone does try, and that effort does come through and creates a fairly few effective moments. Martin Amcarez as Warren Clinton Bush, yes, that is really the character's name, He has a lot of great monologues towards the end of the game, and Brandon C. Harvey portrays General Coach Jobs and Dr. Gortzel, two extremely plot-important characters, very effectively. He gets to be a fun ham as the Mad General while playing into Gortez's egomania and philosophical musings.
I do love the smell of napalm in the morning. Do you smell that, Charlie? Do you? Dun 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 dun. As much as I appreciate recognition of true talent, a criminally scarce quality in our day, it's readily apparent your consciousness is evolved enough to realize who I am.
The music is constantly fitting, while the art is a more mixed bag. The sheer gaudiness of the clashing styles can't be ignored, but there are points where you can see a style from Miller's eclectic landscapes. There's a strong use of colors in the indoor areas, and everyone and everything is covered in little details. Like, for example, the royal family having the upside-down pyramids lapelled on their jackets. It's often way too much at times, which makes the parts with the wide, zoomed-out areas as a breath of fresh air as they're less detailed to overwhelm you. You can feel the game's limitations at times, though, especially with several characters, including major characters, not having walking up or down sprites when they are going to be doing that a lot throughout the game. All that said, the game's strongest element is easily the script. Despite my many issues with Neofeud, it came together in the last act very strongly, making its political point loud and clear. Once the conspiracy plot is unfolded and the villains are out in the open, Neofeud improves so much that it almost feels like a completely different game. It even managed to turn Protege into a proper character and got me to feel for him, despite the very poorly thought out voice given to him. The earlier humor starts to get recontextualized, and I finally got what the intent was early on, even if the earlier execution was so messy. The moment the true bad guy takes center stage, everything finally clicked, and I was treated to what may be one of the strongest final acts I've ever seen in a point and click. I have to recommend Neofeud with a grain of salt for the reasons I listed above, but I do recommend it. To really go into what I ended up loving about it, I need to get into spoilers, so you have been warned. From here on, I am revealing everything. The game's last stretch revolves around the summon of various feudal lords that rule over the world and the stars beyond. Neofeud's world is a capitalist monarchy where the wealthy king rules everything and various lords own their own slices. Said king is Warren Clinton Bush, who were working to undermine with his daughter Sybil. Her goal is to start redistributing wealth and improving things for the masses, which is difficult in a world where a small handful of people are hoarding all the wealth and resources well beyond their natural lifespans, having gained technology to back up their consciousness and have it uploaded into clone bodies. While we're chasing possible leads and came across a conspiracy along the way pointing towards the Mad General Koch Jobs as the big bad, this all ends up being misdirection for the actual endgame. Everything comes back to the Garden of Forking Paths, a masterwork of technology made by the now exiled Dr. Gortzel that lets the user control causality by tapping the endless parallel timelines and causing events from other timelines to take place in ours. While Coach Jobs stages a violent coup over after Warren dies of poisoned wine, the gang heads down to deactivate the machine with Protege, who was built by Gortzel to be a key for the machine in order to stop him, and then they discover they've all been played from the start.
Dying's quite a rush. You should try it sometime.
King Warren? The only plausible explanation is it was you. The king is his own kingslayer. You committed suicide by poisoning yourself.
Hole in one. You found the Maltese Falcon, Detective. Unfortunately, you also found the Horus's talons.
Warren the King orchestrated everything, seemingly killing himself while uploading his consciousness to the machine, gaining control of it once it was activated. It's here where the game stops dancing around what it's been trying to say all game, constantly obfuscated by the odd lore text and the perspectives of our very flawed main cast. Neofeud is an intensely political game that looks at late capitalism with disgust and rage. comparing it to the regression in feudalism by showing the wealthy as the new nobles and lords, devouring whatever they can as the world rots and dies under them. I've seen plenty of examples, including a strong argument for why crime may exist, muddied earlier by Protoge's poor characterization throughout the game, but it's here where everything comes together and you see the worst possible person a system like this can produce. We see a monster who even sees his family as nothing more than pawns and objects, angrily musing about taking his daughter's eyes and putting them in a brainwashed clone. Even Protoge, of all people, can see this absolute evil for what it really is.
And the majority? Murderers, rapists, drug dealers, like this metal thug here. All you do by trying to help them is prolong their pointless, miserable lives of squalor.
That's a whole zip freighter full of fucking bullshit. My maker, Doc Gertzel, he master planned your blingy sky cribs, your chrome warriors, even your god cannon here. And when you got what you wanted, you dumped the mega genius in a landfill, called him a conspiracy nut, a terrorist. You ain't about shit, bitch. You just a scrub, jacking the swagger of giants. Use the Steve Jobs, leeching screen time and dollars off the techno genius of Wozniak. Use a Kanye West, an Illuminati phony, getting rich and shitting all over the legacy of social conscious hip-hop like Public Enemy. You take people who make a difference, flock them over, and make a buck.
The rest of the game explores some high sci-fi concepts, including man-made omnipotence, but everything is focused on showing the true, naked, uncomplicated ugliness of the system based around greed produces. Neofeud ends up not saying that stopping Warren will solve our problems, but if the future has any hope, we have to start putting in the work and fighting for our rights and a better world for everyone. You don't finish the game creating a paradise, you end the game with the starting steps to get there, and honestly, that's more meaningful to me right now.